Welcome to Almost Here, Round the Corner Future Technology podcasts with Richard Jacobs. Future technologies poised to transform our lives for better or worse are the focus of this podcast. Almost here means these technologies are now here and starting to be used, or just around the corner, from Bitcoin to artificial intelligence, 3D printing, blockchain, virtual reality, and more.
This is the Future Tech Podcast. I'm Alan Thomas, and today I have Aman Tsegai with me, founder and CEO of Datazar. How you doing, Aman?
Good. Thank you for having me.
Oh, no problem. So tell us about Datazar. What does the company do?
So Datazar is a research collaboration platform, which means we allow researchers to upload their data, analyze it together, and build out their paper using the platform and using the open source tools that we provide through our platform, web and desktop. And our goal is to make research available to everyone. So all the research that's created, given that it's public, is available to everyone for everyone to read and replicate, and basically embodying the scientific process in a web platform.
Okay, and tell us why it's important to have a service like this. Like, what void is being filled here?
Yeah, so I can probably start with the background of how it all got started, and I think that explains pretty well like the reasoning behind it. So I started Datazar when I was in college. I went to the University of Cincinnati. I was studying physics at the time. I think this was around April of 2015, and basically I loved sharing data. I still do. I loved collecting data, recording data about myself or anything that interested me, and then finally sharing that out to the world. And one day I basically, thought, I love sharing data, and every time I share data, I don't really know what's happening with it. And so I wanted to give people the ability to share data and then receive what was actually done with the data. So if it was used as part of a study, I would love to see it, and that would encourage me more to basically give out more data. And so it was basically a weekend hack at that point. And afterwards, as I continued my research at the university, I saw that there was an actual problem of how research was conducted. The processes were very outdated. And so that kind of led me to keep developing the platform, which wasn't even called Datazar at that point. It didn't even have a name. But I kept developing that, and as we used it in my classroom with my students, I was a TA at that point. I used it with my classmates as well for my classes, and after that, it just became super apparent that this is something that can be viable commercially, and so that I left school at that point and basically took it full time. And so it's very important to have something like this, because the very foundation of the scientific process is very open. Since the beginning of the whole thing, people were sharing, their findings through letters, through public forums, through lectures, and everybody was participating in the discovery process. And so it was very, very important to nurture that. And so that looked different back then. At that point, the lectures were pretty common, or letters, and at this point, the web is the most common form for the general public, and so implementing that in this new process is very important to basically the well-being of the scientific process. And so far, what we allow to do is we encourage people to upload their data and their research, and to basically take people through, the general public, whoever's following their research, to basically take them along the entire experience and finally publishing it. And so everyone kind of participates, whether it is directly through the research or just reading, consuming the research. And so where we're at right now basically is we allow people to first upload their data, whether it is through the API or directly through just simple CSV flat files, and then we allow them to analyze it using programs like R, Python, and visualize it with programs like D3, or libraries like D3, which is a JavaScript library. And we do so by giving out computation power from our servers. So instead of people using their computers to do so, they use our servers, which means even people who have Chromebooks can start doing analysis, which is Chromebooks are very dominant in academia, and so giving access to people who have those systems is also very important. And so it kind of democratizes the computational capabilities that come with these programs. And other than that, we just actually released yesterday something called Datazar Paper, which is a way for you to kind of combine everything you did on Datazar, whether it is the analysis, the notes you have, and build out a scientific paper using the technology released yesterday. And what that does is, as we move away from static papers, images and text, and we go through, videos, because our ideas are getting so complex today, we need more than charts and text to explain them. And so what we developed basically allows people to build out interactive papers that people can read. And if you wanted to change the chart to see different data points, you can do that. And so it kind of helps you increase the understanding of the platform, or the research.
So it's definitely much more of a living document in the sense of it being interactive now.
Exactly. So yeah. So before, you only could read whatever the researcher put out there, and because of some standards of how research papers are written, you can only put out so much data and charts and whatever it is, or images. But now you can actually put on videos explaining it, or even interactive, not only charts but even diagrams, or how things work. And you can do. Browsers have gone so advanced that now they can support thousands of data points being visualized. And so taking advantage of that innovation has been like a goal for us. And not only the paper, but also the analysis and all the data that's behind it is also linked to the paper itself. So if people wanted to see the more expanded view of the paper, they can go directly to the analysis, replicate it themselves, see if it's doing what it actually says. And so, have this very, very transparent process where everyone can participate.
And so if I'm looking to use the platform for my next project and I run across you guys, how do I get started? What do I do day one in order to begin using all these features?
Yeah, so it's actually very easy to get started. We provide pretty much everything on the platform for free for anyone, unless you're doing some massive, you're analyzing massive data sets, something like 2 gigabytes. Then we start charging. But everything is free. So only thing you need to do is go to datazar.com, sign up for an account, and then create a project. We organize things into projects, and so that there's no files flying around out of context. And so you create a file, and then you start by uploading your data. Or if you don't have any data, you can go through other projects on the Explore page and replicate them, and so you can actually use their data directly without having to download or upload anything. And they'll be able to see exactly who's replicating the project, so they can kind of follow what research is being consumed more than the others. And so once you do that, you can create whatever you're comfortable with, whether it's our notebooks, what we call notebooks, which means you can actually break up the code in different parts and analyze it instead of writing massive scripts or anything like that. And then we have consoles, which are basically very familiar to people who got comfortable or very comfortable with using terminals on their computers, and so very similar, both provided through the browser. And we're going to be releasing our desktop application pretty soon, in a month or so, and that basically gives you the ability to analyze everything on your desktop, but still using our servers. So it's kind of a very focused view of the web platform. And everything you do on the desktop application also goes into the web platform, so you don't have to worry about exporting anything. But yeah, so it's as easy as going to datazar.com and creating an account.
Okay, great. And what kind of feedback have you gotten so far from the users in terms of the big differences that they're getting now versus how they used to work?
Yeah, so that's actually a very interesting question. It's so just to unpack that a little bit, everything we've basically developed in the last year or year and a half came directly from feedback from our users. We're a very, very community-oriented company, and so we listen very closely to our users. We talk to them almost every day. We have what we call a community board, which is a group of users who kind of oversee the feedback and they basically interact with the larger user group. And so we take all that feedback and we look into it, and majority of the feedback we've gotten and what we've implemented actually is on the user experience itself, which is kind of surprising because the technology part we've basically figured out extremely fast from the get-go, because that's where we started, and my background is in development, and so that we figured out pretty quickly. But the design part and interaction part was very key, because you're dealing with people from different backgrounds in terms of, some of them are coming from physics, some of them are coming from math, some of them use Python, some of them use R. And so the question was, how do you make the platform comfortable enough for anyone to use on day one? And so a lot of the feedback came from, you need to do this, you need to remove this. And so we worked a lot with our users. And so that was one. And then the second one was just general messaging. How do you explain to people what's happening? Because what we're doing is a very, very long-term process. We don't expect, for people to start doing, millions of people to start doing this, tomorrow. So it's a very long process because what people are currently doing right now has been around for years, for decades at this point, and so it's very hard to change. And so we do, we work as hard as possible to make those people comfortable, at the same time push it a little bit further. And so one example of that is our paper is live and interactive, and that's what we want people to do at the end of the day. But at the same time, we provide technologies like LaTeX and Markdown for people to do what they're already doing right now, so we can make the transition easier. And so that's been the key. It's a common mistake to basically develop something new and forget about everyone and expect everyone to start using your new product immediately, but you still have to provide the transition, which is very important, and what we learned basically over the last year.
And having all these people with all these different backgrounds giving you feedback, and then your own team, what are some of the challenges that you had to overcome in order to bring Datazar to this point?
Yeah, so I guess the most important thing is you have to say no at some point. You can't really implement everything that comes in, both internally and externally. And so that's very important to kind of to frame. And another thing is to basically stand by some of the convictions we have. And so we have certain beliefs of how we develop the product or where we want it to go. And there's always easy fixes and easy ways to go about certain things, but we've always made sure we want to stick to the vision that we laid out when we first started. And so that's always hard to do, especially if it's something that's completely changing how things are done. And so you're automatically at a point where you seem very wrong, and so you always have to keep pursuing ways to make that a reality. So that's one. Another thing is, starting something from scratch obviously is extremely hard, and so listening to entrepreneurs who came before us, making sure that we listen closely and making sure that we're testing our beliefs, and we're being pushed both internally and externally, from our advisors, from previous entrepreneurs that came before us, or even our users, most importantly. And so it's always a kind of like a push-pull journey, but it's what got us this far.
And you kind of already mentioned this, but when people come to you with maybe extra ideas about what they would want to do to the platform, or things they'd want to see, maybe things that seem a little too ambitious for today or this year, is there a standard framework for what to do with those ideas? Do you tuck them away in a vault somewhere to get back to at a certain date, or do you just kind of, I completely put this out of my head for right now?
Yeah, so one of the advantages of being a small team is that we are very flexible on how we implement new ideas, and so sometimes we'll get feedback and we'll implement it overnight. And so we'll put everything aside and we make sure that that's working. Because some even if they're small things, some things are just very crucial and you can't put them away. But there's some of them that are extremely ambitious. There's some things that we want to do 5-10 years from now, and we really divide them into two parts. Some of them, even if they're long-term plans, we make sure that we can achieve those, and so we start implementing things and new ideas now, so we don't have to do it later. And some things are just so ambitious that we don't even have either the resources or even like the time, or if it's not even really, it doesn't even make sense to do it now, so we kind of tuck them away. But there's things that we wrote what we wanted to do, say for example, Datazar paper was an idea that we had from day one. And so we kind of tucked that away and said, before we even get to that paper, we have to make sure that everything else works around it. The building blocks of that paper are, are the analysis, the storage data engine, the scripts, the visualizations. Before any of these come into play, we can't really do anything with the paper. So we kind of tucked that away. And we tried different experiments with that. We did that once. We wrote interactive paper, using code. We let people use code like JavaScript to write it. And then once, even before that, we wrote our own language so that people can understand it easily. But again, timing was key, and so we kind of tucked that away and said, let's wait until we have everything figured out. So that's probably the most important thing, is timing, really, in anything, whether it's launching or new ideas or or anything. It's never right. You're either too late or too early, but I personally believe it's better to be early, a little bit at least.
And so, in thinking about a lot of the things that you've had to kind of pull together to get Datazar just to where it is now, what are some of the, I guess, main achievements that come to mind or big wins that come to mind along the way at this point?
Yeah. So the biggest thing is through that journey when I talked about it earlier. So we raised capital from we're based in Cincinnati, and we raised capital from an accelerator called the Brandery. They were super early supporters, and they helped us launch the first version of the product. And then after that, last year we raised funds from a VC firm in London called Emerge Education. They focus on educational products, and we raised capital from them, and we're actually about to start fundraising again later this summer. But getting those, having that support was very crucial to us. And above that, we also secured some pretty big customers. For example, Scripps, the EW Scripps company in Cincinnati, University of Dayton in Dayton, and so these, making sure that we're doing everything we can to keep going with these customers is also key to us. And so getting those customers was a huge win for us, given that we're a super small team. And also having the continued support of our users. There's some users who have been around with us since day one, and they still make sure that we're on the path, and they still make sure that we want to get that where we want to get. We have mutual beliefs that we want to get to, and so that's been key. And so we always make sure to get those users to where they want to be with the product. So I guess the biggest one is making sure, or has been, being consistent with our users and making sure we don't let them down.
Okay, and for the company itself, what does your roadmap look like the next 12 to 24 months? What can we expect to see?
Yeah, so we're going to be releasing a couple of things. We're releasing our enterprise product next month, which is basically everything we have to offer in a separate server for big companies. So we sell to media companies. We're going through to our financial sector now this summer in Europe, and so we're going to be launching that product pretty soon. It has a couple more features above the cloud, public cloud that we offer, like GPU accelerated computation and a couple other features we haven't released yet. And then we're also going to be releasing our mobile app, which means people are going to be able to read the papers that are written and produced on Datazar on their mobile phones, and so they can interact with the papers, while they're on their commute or when they're sitting on a Sunday afternoon. And so we want to make sure that the papers and the content is being consumed and it can reach as far as possible. So mobile again is one of the biggest breakthroughs. So it's going to be key to get it on there. Another thing is, of course, like I mentioned, we're going to be fundraising this later this summer. So that's something on the roadmap as well. And then obviously that means expanding the team, and so really looking forward to that.
And for a project like this, where it's something that's never been done before, how do you establish criteria for finding team members? Even how do you figure out how to do that?
Yeah, so that's actually very, very hard. That's probably the hardest problem, right? It's you have to go for people who have the same convictions and the same beliefs as you, because that's basically the most important part. When you're, like you said, when you're doing something that's never been done before, you're already starting at a disadvantage because you don't have anything to kind of rely on or say, it's been done here, so we're just replicating it. And so getting people who have very strong beliefs and the same beliefs as you is key. And so it's not really more about talent. Obviously, that's something that has to be set, but the beliefs and the convictions are the most important thing.
Okay, and in terms of, I guess, final thoughts for our listeners, what's the big why in terms of why they should come to Datazar and start to use the platform?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, if you believe science should be available to everyone, if you believe science should be easily accessible and it should be preserved, and it should tell a story where, anyone can go, regardless of their, of where they are, their background, their, what kind of computer they have, anything like that, it should be accessible to everyone. So if you believe that, that's Datazar is definitely where you should be. And again, science has been something that's been around for so long, and we need to basically keep keep pursuing its future and how it should be done. And the mediums change from time to time. They go from letters to lectures. Now we have web, and so making sure we're keeping up with the times as well is going to be super important.
So what's the best method of contact for getting in touch with you and the company and just getting more involved with Datazar?
Yeah, so you can email me at Aman, AMAN, @datazar.com. You can tweet at us at DatazarHQ, or you can swing by our office. We are at Union Hall, Cincinnati on 1311 Vine Street. There should be someone there to greet you. We're always there, and so feel free to come by, shoot me an email, or tweet at us. Okay,
great. Well, I want to thank you, Aman, for coming on and telling us all about Datazar and why we should use it and seek it out. And just thank you for your time.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
You have been listening to Almost Here, Around the Corner Future Technology podcast with Richard Jacobs. Subscribe to this podcast, post a review to discover more future technologies that are poised to transform our lives for better or worse, such as Bitcoin, artificial intelligence, 3D printing, blockchain, virtual reality, and more.